Poaton's back, guys. We got ourselves a pay-per-view. Like I said, some of their biggest stars are at the top. Poatan, Magomed Ankalaev is his opponent, so a clear number one against the champ. And then, of course, Justin Gaethje, who said about 10 fights ago, I only got 5 left. But no, he still has 1 more left, apparently, and he takes on Rafael Fiziev. That's who won the Justin Gaethje sweepstakes last week. So let's get to some of these, starting off with Pereira versus Ankalaev. What's your excitement level, Dan, Tom? Are you excited to dig in and break this one down?
Yeah, I'm very excited for it. Ankalaev, the southpaws get more rare the higher you go in weight class. And this guy is a guy who many, including myself, were really initially high on. However, he's had some weird fights in there, so he's going to still get his chance finally. And I don't think anybody can disagree with that. And who doesn't love Poatan, man? He's definitely been one of my favorites. Obviously we tread that line carefully, but he's one of those few to even get my jaded curmudgeon-y butt to get excited. So yeah, let's go.
Dan, I know one question that'll come up throughout the week, and I encourage you all to check out Dan's work at the end of the week is when he turns everything in, his breakdowns, written, everything. But one thing that will come up is if Magomed Ankalaev decides to just strike like he did in his last fight, kudos to him. But if he just does that with a world champ, a champ in the kickboxing world, and one who's laid out many fools in MMA, is that the biggest mistake, and can he win?
I think it's a big mistake. It's a fight, so of course he can win. But the way I like to frame it is, well, what if he does, right? Especially when you're trying to prognosticate the matchup and figure out what happens. Is it more is it about if he wrestles or not? Yes or no? Which is a big question. It's a both big question on paper as well as, like you said, George. When you go back and look at Ankalaev's fights, like, what are you doing, bro? You're waiting until you get both your legs kicked out until you start pressing your wrestling advantage against Blackpool. Like, the thing is, I like to quote the great Bill Paxton from the one of the few good sequels, the Aliens film from 1986, to further age us out here, guys. But I always ask, is it game over, man? Game over, man. Is it that Damian Maya game over level ground game? And I don't think it is. So you can kind of tell where I'm leaning. But that's how I'm kind of framing this question: is it game over if he does get him to the ground?
Is this the biggest test, Nolan King, for Alex Pereira? He's gone through them really, really quick, and some have been former champs, but this guy does have an overall package, especially when you throw in the wrestling.
Yeah, I don't know if it's certainly a different test, right? I think stylistically, it's one that we've been hoping to see for a while. Alex has largely fought strikers so far in the UFC. But to Dan's point, Ankalaev at times has shown glimpses of his takedowns. I think like in the Krylov fight, he had a handful, but we haven't seen him maybe use it as much as we would expect. I think here, though, he's a guy that has the ability to very much implement a very effective takedown game should he choose. So I'm interested to see what happens if he does choose. And I think that's what the intrigue of this fight is. On one hand, Ankalaev's had weird fights. He's not maybe the barn burner sort of guy, but on the other hand, he does present Alex Pereira a puzzle, if executed properly, that I don't think he's seen yet. And it's a big question mark. So I think this fight is extremely intriguing. I'm glad the UFC gave it to Ankalaev. I think he got unfairly passed over mid last year. So it's good to see him have this now and this opportunity to see if he can crack the code.
And let's not forget, folks, right now at this point in time, the Muslims are observing Ramadan. So this might not be a typical training camp for Ankalaev. It doesn't mean that he can't eat or drink at all. He just can't do it from sun up to sundown. What if Pereira wins? Where's this put him? We know that John Jones is at the top, and he may never get displaced, right? Especially when it comes to just isolating 205. But then you had the greats like Chuck Liddell and Tito Ortiz. Ortiz had 5 title defenses. Liddell had 4. Liddell famously went 2-0 versus Tito Ortiz. So he's actually maybe regarded as the second best. Poaton's on 3. If he gets to 4, he enters this conversation. Does he actually surpass them, or where would you line him up?
Nah, it's tough, man. When you think about that time period, often I think I've used the 4 kings, right? You had Randy Couture, Tito Ortiz, Chuck Liddell, Vitor Belfort. You could even throw Rampage in there for a while. What do all those guys have in common, man? They're all probably at some point going to be in the Hall of Fame, right? Like, these are Hall of Fame fighters. You look at what they've been through. When you look at the guys that Pereira's fought, I don't know that we're really going to say much about all of those fighters, right? So I think he's got to do a little bit more, but he's on his way. I mean, look, we're talking about him right now because it almost doesn't matter who you match him up against. The excitement level to see this guy fight, it doesn't matter. Like, you just want to tune in. But the guys that he's had to go through maybe isn't on the same line as some of those other guys, what they had to battle through.
Scott Christian in the chat says, hey, what about Daniel Cormier? Correct. I think he had 2 title defenses, but he definitely had a great light heavyweight career as well. He should be mentioned. Different eras, it's hard to compare, but that's the one thing about Pereira, who was just a middleweight less than 2 years ago, has done so much at light heavyweight that we can even have this conversation.